Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are the
FAIRtax Guys.
Inviting you to talk to us here at the FAIRtax Guys at gmail.com. That's our official email address. We're on Facebook, the facebook.com/the FAIRtax Guys. If you got a question or a comment, we'd love to hear from you.
Yep, and if you've never listened to us before, you might guess that we talk about the fair tax.
Yeah, we do.
and which will replace the current income tax. Okay.
It is.
Now, Bob, today's episode was your idea, so I'm going to let you introduce it.
Okay. Well, we've spent the last couple of episodes here on FAIRtax Power Radio trying to make the case that the income tax system, the income tax code that we've got, is just outdated. It's archaic. It's too complicated to work with, and it must be replaced. But of course, the government must continue to be funded.
Right.
So what is, if you just ask the question, what is the best way to fund the government at its current level? And that very question was put to some Houston businessmen over 20 years ago. They started with a clean sheet of paper, and they devised what has become known as, it wasn't called this at the time, but it was become known as the fair tax.
That's right.
That is the best way, and it wasn't just these business people. I mean, they put over $20 million of their own money into researching this thing, hiring economists. Some of the most prestigious economists from some of the most prestigious universities in the country were tasked with putting together what would be the best tax system, and the fair tax is what they came up with.
And out of that effort came the Americans for Fair Taxation. And the president, Steve Hayes, who we interviewed a few weeks ago, lives here in Florida. Steve is probably, as we introduced him, or as Bob introduced him, probably the most knowledgeable person when it comes to the fair tax in the entire country. And we continue the efforts. That's why Bob and I are so passionate about this and volunteer our time. We go to public events. We open an information table, give out information, talk to people. We do the radio show. We have a webinar. Not Bob and I, but there is a webinar that's held on the fourth Thursday of every month. It's a 1-hour webinar. You can register for it at fairtax.org/webinar. You have to register for it in advance. It's 1 hour. It's interactive. You can ask questions and get answers. So there's lots of ways to learn about the fair tax.
Okay, but one thing that we've got to do before we can get anything else, first we, of course, have to convince people that the income tax code, income tax system needs to go away. But you need to get people to think outside the box. Because you realize the 16th Amendment, which authorized the income tax, was ratified in 1913. We've had an income tax for over 100 years. It's the only system that working people of today have ever known, and it's just accepted as the way it is, but that does not have to be. Get people to think outside the box, to think that there is a better way, and then you can see that the fair tax makes a huge amount of sense, much, much more so than the current income tax that we've got now. You could not devise, I've said this before, you could not devise a more fraud-prone, a more error-prone, a more invasive, intrusive, they trample all over the Bill of Rights kind of system than the current income tax. And it works so well. A state sales tax. We've seen this. 45 of the 50 states have a state sales tax. You buy something, the tax is added to, or in the case of gasoline and stuff like that, included in the price. You anonymously pay the tax at the cash register when you buy something, and you're done with it. Why not do that for the whole country? Get rid of this cumbersome, intrusive, invasive, it can be weaponized as well, income tax code, and just pay your federal taxes at the cash register the same way you pay your state taxes. It just makes so much sense, but people don't think about it because that's not the system we've got, and it's so different from what we've got now. So we would ask you, please, for the next half hour here on FAIRtax Power Radio, go along here, think outside the box. Let's look at the merits of the system instead of, well, that's just not the way it is.
So we're going to talk about how it helps people.
Yeah, because I'll tell you what, I'm not going to mention any examples, but a lot of bad legislation has been passed because its backers made it look like it's going to help people.
Yeah.
Now, what's going to happen with the fair tax? That's for real. The promises are real. This is going to work. It's got $20 million plus of research behind it that it will work. So this is not pie in the sky. This is real world stuff. And it really is going to be a tremendous help to just about anybody you can name. Name me somebody, and we'll go with that.
Okay, I made a little list here. Let's start with, say, a low-income earner.
A low-income earner. Okay. Now, one of the arguments against a sales tax from day one has always been sales taxes are regressive. They hurt the poor worse than they hurt the rich, because it's very simple. I mean, if you and I had to pay 23% of our income to the tax man, that would be a rather significant chunk. Now, Donald Trump and Mitt Romney, rich people like that, could lose 23% to the tax man and still live quite sumptuously.
Yeah.
So the same tax rate applied to everybody sounds fair, but it really doesn't work, because if you take 23% of a poor person's income away, that is much, much more impact on them than taking 23% of a rich person's impact away. So one of the things that the FAIRtax had to come up with was a way to make sure that that doesn't happen. Because when you pay the sales tax, again, it doesn't care who you are, how much money you make, you pay the tax at the register and you go on. So there has to be a way to make sure that the lower income people are not harmed by this. And there's kind of a precedent for this already in the current system. It's called the tax refund. If your withholding exceeds your tax liability, you get back a refund. You get your own money back for taxes that were collected from you that were not actually owed.
Some people liken it to the standard deduction.
Mm-hmm. And under the FAIRtax, everybody will pay the FAIRtax on every purchase they make of new goods and services. If you buy used, that's not subject to FAIRtax. We'll get to that a little bit later. But you will pay the FAIRtax basically on every purchase you make, but you don't owe any FAIRtax until your spending exceeds the poverty level for your household size. And that's calculated by the Department of Homeland, whatever?
Health and Human Services.
Okay. I was getting there. But you know what the poverty level for your household size is. So if you spend up to that much money, and that's just what it takes to survive. Basic food, shelter, clothing, stuff like that. Nothing fancy, no yachts, no jet airplanes included in that.
No.
So the poverty level is just what the government estimates that it takes you to survive, to provide the basic necessities for your family. And philosophically, you should not pay taxes on what it costs to stay alive.
Exactly.
But since the FAIRtax tax is spending, and it's going to be collected at the cash register every time, you don't owe it, though, until you're spending. Now, they had two ways to do this. They could try to keep track of how much everybody spends. Can you imagine the logistical nightmare that would be?
That would be a nightmare.
And how much fraud and abuse that would be. But then they said, all right, there's a real easy way to do this. We'll collect the tax from everybody, but we will rebate back to everybody the tax that they don't owe up to the spending of the poverty. And what the poverty level is.
But Bob, how do they know how much to rebate?
How much did I? Oh, well, I'm glad you asked me that. I'm getting there. I was fixing to say, what the poverty level is for your household size. And you were saying the other day that for a 4-person household, mom and dad and 2 kids, that the rate is about $32,000.
Yeah, Health and Human Services have set for most of the states. Alaska and Hawaii have their own rates, but for the 48 contiguous states, the poverty rate for mom and dad and 2 kids, a family of 4, is right about $32,000, just slightly over $32,000. They say that's how much it takes to maintain a family of 4 for basic necessities, food, clothing, shelter, basic med care, and so on. And so so the prebate that Bob is talking about, it takes that figure, the $32,000, I think $40, and takes 23% of it, and then doles that out in a monthly increment, and I believe the monthly increment is $614. And as Bob was saying, they nicknamed that the prebate, and that mechanism ensures that people living right at the poverty level don't end up paying taxes on the basic necessities of life. Yes, they'll pay the FAIRtax when they buy the things, but they're going to be reimbursed for the FAIRtax at the beginning of the month.
Okay, let me get my trusty calculator here and figure this out here. Let's see, $32,000 will be how much you have to spend just to stay alive if you're a family of 4.
Yep.
Now, 23% of that is $7,360. That is how much FAIRtax you will pay on if you spend $32,000, because under this thing is 23% of every dollar you spend is FAIRtax.
Yeah.
and it's included in the price. So we're saying $73.60 is how much fair tax you'll pay on the year. Divide that by 12, and you get a monthly rebate every year. If you spend right at the poverty level, you will pay at the register $613 worth of fair tax that you don't owe, because you're spending. It doesn't count until you go above that $32,000.
Yeah.
So rather than trying to keep track of how much everybody spent, they just give everybody back. Doesn't matter how much you make. Everybody that's a household of four will get a prebate of $613, which is, again, a refund of your money that was collected from you that you didn't know, and you get it back. $613 a month. That's amazing.
We try to keep it simple. Everybody pays the fair tax. Everybody gets the prebate. It is that simple. And it doesn't make any difference. You could be a wealthy family, a family of four that has a lot of income. You'll still get the same prebate because it's based on the number of people in the household. That's it.
Okay, but you're talking about how does the fair tax specifically impact a low-income earner?
Well,
let's stay on that right now. How would you like to be a low-income earner, family of four, barely getting by at minimum wage or slightly above, and the government will send you a check for $613 every month that you're not getting now?
That's got to be a nice little supplement there.
That works really well, and it doesn't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or a liberal or a conservative or a libertarian or anything else. There's nobody out there that would not like to have a little extra money in their pocket. But
what about withholding?
I said, you got me. I said, but that's not all. You hear that?
But wait, there's more.
Yes, wait, there's more. We've done that before. But as we again have mentioned before, that the fair tax is a replacement for the current income tax system. And if you are working for a paycheck, or if you're receiving a retirement distribution, or if you win the lottery or anything like that, there is withholding taken out of your paycheck before you even get it. Uncle Sam has set himself up as your highest spending priority. He gets his cut before you get to spend a dime to help your family, which is
under the current system.
Kind of wrong, but that's the way the current system works. So again, if you're a low-income earner, you are not bringing home everything you earn, because Uncle Sam is taking a chunk out of it. And even if your income is not high enough to actually pay taxes, and you file your return at the end of the year and you get it all back, you are still paying payroll taxes. Among the most regressive taxes on the planet are the taxes that support Social Security and Medicare. And if you're a low-income earner and you have to pay those taxes, you don't get that back.
No.
That's gone. That's, about 15% of your paycheck?
It's more than that. Depending on your yearly income, your income tax could be 15%. And then the Social Security, the FICA is 7.65, matched by your employer, another 7.65. So that's sizable. Now, that's under the current system. What happens under the fair tax, Bob?
Under the fair tax, those payroll taxes go away along with your withholding. Since there's no more income tax to pay, the withholding that supports it goes away. Now, the fair tax does not eliminate the programs of Social Security and Medicare, those things that people have come to rely on for a long time. It actually puts those, and you keep hearing in the news how those things are going broke,
Yeah.
But the fair tax actually puts Social Security and Medicare on a firmer financial footing by extending the tax base. Currently, the only people who support Social Security and Medicare are those who are working for a paycheck and have that FICA and that Medicare tax withheld from them. Other folks who are making their living off investments or other ways like that, they are not supporting Social Security and Medicare. But if the fair tax becomes law, then Social Security and Medicare, it's right there in the bill, the percentage of the fair tax revenue that has to go to those two programs. It extends the tax base from people who are just working for a paycheck to everybody who buys something. So it will put Social Security and Medicare on a much firmer foundation than they are right now.
So getting back to the low-income worker,
Yeah.
the benefits of the fair tax, 1, you get your whole paycheck. 2, you get a prebate. In addition to that, the fair tax is only levied on new products and services, new products. So if it's time to trade in the old car and get another one, you don't have to buy a new one. You can buy a good used one. Somebody already paid the fair tax on that once. There's no double dipping. So if you buy used stuff, then you're going to save the fair tax. So there's another benefit for the working poor.
That's really cool. If you can buy enough of your stuff used, which is not subject to fair. Now, the prebate is not subject to what you spend.
That's
it's
right.
Based on the poverty level. So if you are able, by buying used and maybe bartering with your neighbors for stuff like that, if you can actually hold your spending below the poverty level, your tax rate under the fair tax is negative. You get more back in your prebate than is collected from you at the register, and you come out ahead. A boon. The fair tax would be an absolute godsend for low-income earners.
What are people going to do with all this extra money, Bob?
I don't know. Maybe buy a Learjet.
I'm not sure it'll be that much. But
I'm being facetious.
Well, there's going to be,
that's not going to work.
They'll either spend it or they'll save it. Either one is good. Now, a friend of mine who's got a PhD in economics and so forth, he said savings is good. The economic definition of savings is deferred spending. You put something in the bank, eventually it's going to get spent. No matter what, eventually it's going to get spent. So savings is just as good as spending because it's spending that's going to be done later on. So all this extra money that's available to this family is going to help the economy. They're going to buy more stuff, or they're going to put money in savings so they can buy their own house. And when they buy their own house, they don't have to buy a new one. They can buy a used one, and thereby again save the fair tax on it. So the benefits to the low income people of the fair tax are tremendous. They will really truly help these people. So those that say, "Oh, it's a sales tax and it's regressive," they don't know what they're talking about.
They don't. And it is the only tax plan that completely untaxes the poor.
Yeah.
Because again, if you've got this system where you get back everything that's withheld from you, low-income earners are still, again, paying those Social Security and Medicare taxes that go away under the fair tax. So there is absolutely, when we say zero federal tax liability for low-income people, or actually low-spending people, let's put it this way, because the fair tax is spending, not income.
Right.
And of course, if you don't have it, you can't spend it. But if you spend at or below the poverty level, then the fair tax is the only system that completely untaxes you. Everything that's collected from you is given back to you. Your out-of-pocket tax rate is zero. If I were a low-income person, and I'm not really that bad, but not rich by a long stretch of the imagination, I love this. I love the idea of not having any withheld from my retirement distribution.
Yeah.
I love the idea, if I were still working, of not having any withholding out of my paycheck. If I win the lottery, I'll get to keep it all and not have half of it taken away in taxes up front. But it is just such a beautiful, and it's so simple. Ron, it is so simple. You don't have to provide the merchant with any kind of personally identifiable information. You just pay the sales tax when you buy stuff. The merchant is responsible for remitting it to the tax collection agency, which under the fair tax will actually be the states. The states will collect the fair tax, and there will be absolutely zero need for the IRS other than to wrap up the old business that they still had to work on before the fair tax goes into effect. The IRS goes away, audits go away, withholding goes away, payroll taxes go away, and life is good.
So as time goes on, let's say the low-income worker becomes a middle-income worker or a high-income worker. All right. Well, if it's still a family of four, they get the same prebate. It doesn't make any difference. But if they have more disposable cash, well, then it's up to them. Are we going to spend it or are we going to save it? They'll probably do both. They'll probably spend a little more, get some nice stuff, maybe get a new car instead of a used car and so forth. Get some, big screen TV, whatever. That's their decision. And so when they do that, when they start spending above the poverty level, they'll end up paying more of the fair tax because the more you spend, the more you pay in fair tax. And if if somebody ends up getting a really, really good job and they're making maybe $100,000 or $200,000 a year, and they're still a family of four, they get the same prebate. Now, when you're hauling in $100,000 or $200,000, the prebate $613 or $614 is not going to be that big a deal. But since it's still a family of four, it's the same. Now let's go on to some other categories here, Bob.
But I'm thinking this for the middle income person as well. The thing that people in that area need to remember is that savings and investment are tax free. People that are middle income folks are usually the ones that have kids they'll send to college. If you got kids to send to college and you're trying to save for them, The saving is totally tax-free. The interest that you would get on your savings, totally tax-free. You can save and invest 100% free of federal taxation under the fair tax. You're only taxed when you spend, not when you save or when you invest.
Because when the fair tax gets put into law, the income tax goes away. And we should also emphasize that sister legislation will require the repeal of the 16th Amendment. That is a necessary item. Until that is ratified, all the current income tax code is rescinded. That's part of the language of the fair tax. The IRS has no authority to do anything anymore, because when this bill is passed by the House and Senate and signed by the President, the current income tax goes away. I mean, the law goes away. The language goes away. It is rescinded. So
that's it. The fair tax bill is 133 pages. It does not take 133 pages to describe the fair tax. A good chunk of that 133 pages is reference to the current tax code that is repealed.
All right.
So that's just amazing. If you're ever on Jeopardy and they ask you that, you will know.
Oh, yeah. Good point. Let's go on to another category. We've talked about low-income earners, middle and high, and so forth. How about a newborn baby? A newborn baby who doesn't know anything about taxes, obviously. What is the benefit to a newborn of the fair tax?
Their parents have more money to spend under the fair tax.
Yeah, they do.
They can buy them more goodies.
But that child grows up without the IRS, without the income tax. If they never understand how bad the IRS and the income tax was, that's okay. All right, I've said this before.
If you only know about the IRS from the history books, that'll work really nice.
And when I'm at a public event and I'm meeting the public and so forth, and they've got a little child in their arms or in the stroller or something, I say, my goal is to get rid of the income tax so that child never has any idea of what the income tax was or what the IRS did. If they never know about it, it'll be fine with me. So the newborn also. You might know that due to current spending by our federal government, every newborn is saddled with how much debt?
About 5 figures worth, I believe, is the last I saw.
It is. It's pretty bad. Well,
it's nasty.
The fair tax, a lot of the research shows that the fair tax is going to boost the economy. We're going to create jobs like never before. And those people are going to be spending, and they're going to be providing the government. So we have to keep after Congress, because the fair tax is a revenue issue. It is not a spending issue. But once spending is off the table for Congress, we can watch once the revenue issue is off the table, we can better pay attention to what Congress is doing and make sure that they're not spending us into oblivion. So under the fair tax, with the boost to the economy and the increased revenue, we can bring that debt down so that newborn doesn't grow up to have, a $50,000 or $100,000 tax bill.
Okay. Well, time is flying by here. The next 2 items on your little list of folks that we want to talk about: college students and unemployed construction workers. Okay. Now, you hit on this. The fair tax is not just a revenue bill. It is going to be the greatest jobs bill that this country ever saw. We've got college students now that are graduating. They can't find a job. They have to come back and live in mom and daddy's basement. You've got construction workers, no jobs, nothing to do that. The fair tax will bring jobs to America in a way that is just unprecedented, because we've got trillions of dollars that American companies are keeping offshore to escape the punishing tax rate that we have in this country. But if we have the fair tax, the corporate tax rate goes to 0, and we'll elaborate on that a little bit more in another episode here. But it will make the United States the most business-friendly place to do business. Jobs are going to flow back here, and you would have to hide under a rock not to be able to find a job, and a good job, if the fair tax was law here, because all of the business and all of the jobs that will come back here, because it is so friendly to do business here.
And I've seen a figure, and this was astounding, but it's backed up with research. 75% of current college students cannot find a job in their field. Now,
wow.
Yeah, 75% right now. Yeah, that's not good. And if you're an out of work construction worker, what do? Well, sometimes you have to move. You have to go on the road where there's a project, and go to work away from your family. Your family's back here, and you might be living in another state working a construction project. Yeah. There'll be so darn much construction when the FAIRtax gets going and it starts revving up the economy. There'll be construction all over the place.
Yeah, what's funny, there was a survey one time that a lot of international CEOs, CFOs were asked what the effect would be if the FAIRtax was law in the United States and the corporate tax rate was zero and there was hardly any compliance cost involved with doing business here. And about 40% of them said that they would build their next plant or their next distribution center, next what have you here in the United States. The other 60% said they would move here. Yeah. And that is what creates jobs. Private enterprise, business creates jobs, not government. And the FAIRtax will bring business to America like nobody's business.
Because now we have the opposite. Corporate inversion, you may have heard that term. The income tax code and the regulations and the compliance costs are driving companies away. We have the opposite taking place right now. So we need to correct that.
So if you're a college student or you're an unemployed construction worker, what you need is more jobs, and the FAIRtax will do that. So how do we make this happen, Ron? Where can people go to lean on their congressmen and senators to make this FAIRtax happen?
Well, Bob is right. Lean on your congressmen and senators, okay? Phone your congressman's office and your senator's office and tell them you want them to co-sponsor the legislation. Yes, it is legislation in Congress. In the House, it's H.R. 25. In the Senate, it's S-155. And phone calls are very effective. And get your friends and neighbors to call them, too. We did an interview with my congressman, Ted Yoho, in my part of Florida, and he made the comment, if an office gets a phone call, like 15 phone calls on a particular subject, it goes on the agenda for the next day's discussion. It gets their attention. So phone calls are very effective.
You can believe that even though you're going to be talking to a staffer in all probability, what you're calling about and what your position is being recorded. I mean, yep. They know who their constituents are or what they're talking about and what they want. They do keep track. And PopVox is a great way to do that.
Yeah, that took the words right out of my mouth. PopVox, POPVOX.com, like popular voice of the people. This is a great website where you can weigh in on any pending legislation. Now, we ask you to go and talk about the FAIRtax, H.R. 25 in the House, S-155 in the Senate. You can make comments. I'm in favor of this legislation. I'm not in favor of it. And you can say why. And then when you write in your comments, they go to your representative and your two senators. So, and you can see how other people are weighing in. Currently, the FAIRtax enjoys like a 95% popularity. 95%. Okay?
Oh, that's amazing. And of course, one thing that you really have got to do is join Americans for Fair Taxation.
Yep.
That is the grassroots organization at the national level, and the more people that these grassroots organizations have, the more clout they've got when their representatives, and we do have representatives, thanks Steve Hayes and what's Ernst, oh God, her name escapes me. They're the lady that goes up with her. But we've got people on the ground in Washington pushing for the fair tax. And the first thing they ask, well, how many people do you represent? How many are in your organization?
Yeah.
So you do need to do it.
BigSolution.org. That's the website you need to go to. BigSolution.org. And connect, contribute, and go to the website and you'll see what's there. It's pretty obvious. We need your help. We need the public behind this if we're going to make it happen, because Congress, as Bob is likely to say, Congress just rearranged deck chairs on the Titanic and said they did something.
Yep. All right. And time is gone. So Bob Paxton and Ron Valero, the FAIRtax Guys, again reminding you the FAIRtax is America's big solution. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
FAIRtax is coming.